Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live grant writing workout with Teresa Huff. We're super excited to bring her back to the stage. She is an incredible podcast host. If you've never checked out her podcast, Grant Writing Simplified, definitely check that out. But today we're going to do an experimental event in which we're really trying to create events where you're actually applying the things that the speaker is also teaching you. That way you can feel that there's a lot of practicality behind that as well. And it can kind of mirror some of those in-person workshops that a few of you folks may have experienced a couple years ago before everything that's been going on in the world right now. So I'm very excited to bring Teresa back. She'll give a quick introduction to herself. And if you have any questions along the way, please do include 3 hashtags in front of your question. It makes it a lot easier to spot that. And Teresa, feel free to take it away.
All right. Hello, and thank you, Will, and welcome everyone. I love seeing where everyone's from and just pulling in from all over the country and sometimes even across the world. So keep popping in your name and your location in the chat, as Will said. And if you're still just now popping on, go ahead and do that. Pop your questions there, and we'll try to answer as many as we can today. So it's great to see you. And a lot of what we're going to do today is some really hands-on exercises, just like when you are working out at the gym. And if you're first learning something, it's helpful to repeat it over and over, maybe in slow motion sometimes to kind of get the hang of it. And then you get better and better each time you come back to the gym. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to work through some grant writing exercises. And these are some things that I learned over time that really help level up my writing and the competitiveness of my applications that I'm working on. So hopefully this will be useful for you as well. And this is something that a lot of times I learned the hard way, but I had to keep working and developing those muscles, just like at the gym. I had to keep going back. I had to keep practicing, repeating those over and over. And like Will said, pop in your name and organization if you haven't yet. And I would love to know, pop in the chat, how many grants have you written? And, we're not here to judge if it's 0, if it's 1,000, if it's somewhere in between. If you have no idea, I'd love to hear what kind of experience do we have in the room? And I'm guessing it's going to be all over the place. Looks like so far we've got all kinds, some more than 100, more than they can even count, some 0 or 1. So that's great. Keep popping it in. I have written a lot, and as Will said, I host the Grant Writing Simplified podcast. I started out as a special ed teacher and then wanted to stay home when we had kids, and I started learning grant writing, and I realized that was a really unique and interesting way that I could incorporate my teaching skills and my love of serving and helping communities to make a difference, but I could still do it just behind the scenes from my laptop, but make a big impact on communities and helping them get the support they need for these different causes. And so now I love teaching it to others. I love doing these kinds of workshops. And this is the kind of thing I work with grant writers in my programs, because it does take that repetition over and over. And sometimes when we're in the weeds of it, it's really hard to look objectively at our own writing. And so it just takes a little different perspective from someone to show us, oh, wait, just a couple of small tweaks could really help level up what we're working on. So yeah, keep popping these in the chat. I love seeing how many and where you guys are from. So today we are going to cover a few really key pieces. We're going to talk about finding your fun facts. I'll explain what that means in just a minute. We're going to talk about writing tight. This is one of my favorite ways of wrestling and working my grant writing muscles. And then we are going to talk about wrestling your data into shape. And all of these, like I said, take time and polish and practice, but you will get there. And so even if you've already been writing grants, this will help you improve your writing, because it's a process, it's a journey. It's not like we ever become a full-fledged perfect writer. Writing is so subjective sometimes. And so all these skills we can learn to get better and better and better. And so what we're going to do throughout this is we're going to talk about one of the concepts. I'm going to show you some examples, and then we're going to take a few minutes and you're going to practice it. And then we're going to keep doing that back and forth with each of these concepts. So get ready to get to work. Make sure you have made a copy of the worksheet that Will popped in the chat back at the beginning. because you'll need that to be able to type directly into that Google Doc so you can follow along. All right, so the first workout we're going to do today is find your fun fact. And we'll just share that worksheet again, and also the Instrumentl link. If you have not tried Instrumentl yet, I highly recommend you go give it a test drive. If you work with a nonprofit in any capacity, if you do any kind of grant writing, it has so many features that are useful. So I recommend that will really help speed up your work and clarify some of the things you're looking for that we'll talk about today even. So just some other fun facts about me. I have written grants, been in education, business, several different aspects of those for over 20 years. Had a lot of students go through my courses, over 3,200. My podcast is in the top 10% globally, and it's been downloaded in over 100 countries, which to me seems crazy, but I'm so glad, because that's another way to help make a difference for nonprofits. Now, why am I telling you this? Not to toot my horn or to say, oh, look at me, but this is to show you that because of the platforms I'm using and because of the kinds of data I'm tracking, I was able to quickly compile these into these clear statistics that make a powerful punch. And I can just show these and boom, boom, boom. You can see at a glance, okay, what does she do? What's she about? What kind of impact does she have? I know that every single one of you, either personally or in your nonprofit, and probably both, have some kind of fun fact. So the first exercise we're going to do is to look at what makes your nonprofit special. And here's a couple of examples. For example, and today I'm going to be pulling several examples from some of the submissions that you guys sent in, which thank you for being willing to do that. Everyone was very generous and open to that. So these are all used with permission. But just to clarify that, these are all direct submissions that people have sent in today. So first of all, if we say, look at the total number of volunteers, 3,000 individual volunteers are giving approximately 22,000 hours of work in this organization's example. That's incredible support. That is something worth highlighting. So if you are making something at a glance in a grant application, or even in your newsletter or in a brochure about your organization, if you're trying to get a donor's attention or a funder, a grant maker's attention, this is a great way to do it, because it shows, hey, people believe in us. We have community support that is tremendous. I mean, 3,000 individuals, that is crazy support. So think about, what do you have in your nonprofit? You may not have 3,000 volunteers, and that's okay. Don't compare yourself and then start thinking, oh, but well, we can't use that. Maybe you have 20 volunteers. Great. Use it. Show that they really care. What do you have? It may not be that many volunteers, but it may be something else. It may be that you've had people donate housing or donate food or all kinds of things that make you unique. What is that? Here's the second one. Since the summer program began, Compass has served over 600 students from 35 states and 3 countries. That's pretty cool. And do you see how they have handpicked, they've compiled, they were tracking that data, and they were able to say, look, we're in 35 states. That's impressive, in 3 different countries. So what do you have either about yourself or your nonprofit or even your team? Sometimes it's a matter of, okay, collectively, our team has this much experience or this much training or this many certifications. Whatever it is, what can you show? So I would like you in your worksheet to dig up a fun fact about yourself, your team, or your organization, and get creative with this. Really think through. So we're going to take, let's say, we'll probably 4 or 5, maybe 3 minutes, and then we'll take a couple minutes to share. Would that be about right?
Yeah, that sounds great. And in the chat, I just gave the copy link. If you click that first one, it should make a direct copy in your Google account. But in the case where that didn't work for whatever reason, since I've been getting a couple share requests as well, you can click the second link, and that's a view only page, and you can go to file, make a copy that way too. But the two should do the same thing. So just in case you're having any difficulty there.
All right, so everyone find that first question, the workout number 1, and we'll take about 3 minutes to go ahead and really think through what could we highlight and what would be a super powerful thing that we could showcase about our work, our team, or your career if you are a grant writer looking to work with nonprofits. And just brainstorm some ideas there. Feel like we should play some Jeopardy music in the background.
I can see about that. Let me take a look.
Just thought of that. And if you have questions, feel free to pop it in the chat as well as you're going. Great question. Is it best to try and write this in the active voice? Yes. I always try to write an active voice as much as possible in grant applications. And that's something we're going to be talking about in just a minute. So you are setting the stage for the next part. Make it as active and interesting and exciting as possible. Okay, not to rush, but as you're coming up with these, feel free to go ahead and pop some in the chat. I would love to hear and share some examples of what you're working on if you feel open to doing that. We serve 22 tons of food each week. That is a lot of food. And if you did the math over a year, that would be astronomical. Care for half the children and youth needing residential care in Indiana. You've got several good, powerful things there. And can you also include a number? You may not have it with you, but as you go back, if you can calculate to specify that even more, that would be really powerful. The only agency that offers infant, child, and adult CPR in Spanish and English. Very good. Small rural humane society in Michigan, able to intake and place over 300 dogs and cats in forever homes per year. Over 4,000 service dogs in the last 43 years. Wow. Helps nearly 10,000 people during the course of their working career. These are some powerful things. And then, okay, here's one in the opposite. In the neighborhoods we serve, unemployment is up to 3 times higher than Chicago's average. That's a powerful statement to really get a funder's attention and say, oh, wait, they need something there. They need some support. All right, these are looking so good. Keep popping them in. I won't be able to read them all, but these are great. And are you seeing how sometimes just using the data you already have and quantifying that into something really powerful at a glance can showcase and really make an impact? Feeds over 3,000 school-going children with healthy meals every month. Okay. These are amazing. So keep thinking through this as you are brainstorming and as you go back to your team and as you're looking at your data. And it could be that maybe you need to start tracking something or look something up that you hadn't thought about yet. But this is a really cool way to do that. And how can you really show the impact? And this carries over, not just with your grants, but it carries over. Maybe you want something powerful like this on your website, on your social media, on your newsletter, places where you can share. Boom, this is the kind of impact we're making. This is how many kids, how much food we're giving. All right, keep popping those in. You can still see my slides, correct? Okay, good. All right, so the second workout, I'm probably going to say on every single one of them, this is my favorite. The last one was my favorite, but this one is also my favorite. They're all kind of my favorites. I like them. And this is a lot of fun to do. When you write type, this is a way of, I like to call it positive action writing. Instead of saying active and passive voice, that can be kind of vague and confusing and hard to get the hang of. But I like to think of it more like positive actions. How can you write in a way that conveys the positive action you are taking? And that kind of shows the difference between active and passive voice. Is this showing action and something positive? Or is it just, we could do that? So think about that when you're looking at it and when you're evaluating your writing, because by writing this way, it makes it more powerful. You can help people visualize what you're actually doing and what the future could look like if they were to fund this and help you expand this program. Help cast that vision and show what's possible as they're reading your application. I'll show you what I mean. So say if beforehand, here's an example. If we were awarded this grant, we could offer an after-school tutoring program that could potentially help a lot of students improve their grades. Okay, how'd you feel about that? We could do this if we were awarded, if you would help us. It'd be a lot of kids. How about this one? With these funds, we will provide 9 months of after-school tutoring to improve the reading scores of 100 at-risk students. Do you see the difference? With these funds, we will do this, as opposed to, if we were awarded this grant, we could do these things and it would be really good for our students. Don't be wishy-washy. Watch out for words like could, would. Watch out for future and past tense. If you're using past tense to describe something that's happening in the future, that's not an action word. That's not how you want to convey it. So look at those key things and see how can you revise your writing in that way. So here's an example. The original says, at the core of ABC's programs is the desire to support the local healthcare providers as requested to build their healthcare system's capacity to care for more of their community. Okay, that's a little bit not real positive action. It says, is the desire to support as requested. So let's see how we can tighten that up. What if we change that around and say, ABC's core programs support local healthcare providers in building system capacity to care for more people. We've tightened that up. We've cut it about in half, but yet we've made it more impactful by using fewer words. So sometimes the more words you have, the more confusing and wishy-washy it becomes. Or we could just say, at the core, ABC's programs support, and then finish out exactly what you're doing. Do you see the difference and see how sometimes the extra words don't help? It's kind of ironic because in college they teach us, okay, you need a 12-page research paper. And so we're doing everything we can to just fill up that 12 pages. And it's like torture. We just say anything and use as wordy as we can. In grants, they're saying you have 500 characters to answer these 5 questions and tell us this compelling need and explain. And if you've written a grant before, I know you can relate. So this is where we have to make every word count, and sometimes even every character count. How can you make it as impactful and simple and clear as possible? So it's your turn. Let's look at examples for the workout number 2. Keep it tight and positive and action. And I'm going to flip over to that. So tell me can you see mine, or do I need to reshare to switch?
We can see it.
Okay, you can see my worksheet. Perfect. I will see if I can enlarge it a little bit. Let's do a couple of these together, and then you can do a couple of exercises on your own. This is an example that came in. What we are most proud of is the compassion, kindness, and care shown by our case managers to all our clients when providing support and guidance every step of the way while households are applying for public benefits, unemployment, or when parents enroll their children in school, helping clients navigate through somewhat very complex systems. Okay, this is a great cause. It's a great start. And it's really good to highlight, yeah, we are proud of our work here because it is making an impact. But let's see how we can make this one sentence make more of an impact, because this is kind of a mouthful and it's a lot of stuff all in one. How can we tighten it up? Let's say, instead of what we are most proud of is, how about just saying we are most proud of our case managers' compassion, kindness, and care to all our clients. Let's put a period there and take a breath for a second, because your reader is also going to need to take a breath. Think of it, if you're reading this, would you want to read a huge paragraph in one sentence like that and have to process? Let's give your brain a break, give the reader's brain a break, because they're probably looking at 50, 100, maybe 500 applications. So think through how you can break this down. This is what we're most proud of. Then you can go on and say, they provide support and guidance to help clients navigate. How about just one of those words? They guide clients through the complexities of public benefits, unemployment, and school enrollment. Boom. How about that? That's about half as long, but more powerful. Do you see the difference? Do you see how we cut out some of the fluff and just got down to what do we really need to know? How can we make it active, clear, concise, and compelling? And instead of saying helping them navigate through somewhat very complex systems, we've woven it together to already show, not tell, instead. All right, let's do one other together, and then I'll let you all do one on your own. The purpose of this letter is to express our intent in applying for $50,000 from the XYZ Foundation to operate our 90-day emergency shelter. Funding from your foundation will deepen the impact of our program and increase awareness for our organization. We ensure long-term sustainability by utilizing several different revenue streams, including, and then they go on to name those. So let's see, how can we tighten those up? And instead, I'm just going to go ahead and say, then on this one, instead of saying deepen the impact of our program and increase awareness, I would quantify that more. Yeah, that's great. We all want to deepen impact. We all want to increase awareness. But I remember how we found our fun facts in the beginning, how we quantified and said, we have this much experience. We impact 2,000 families. We serve 2 tons of food. Let's define, what does deepen the impact mean? Does that mean serving 2 more kids? Does that mean serving 10,000 kids? What is that? And increase awareness. What will that do? So let's define those 2 pieces a little bit more to make it more powerful. And then instead of, we ensure long-term sustainability by utilizing several different revenue streams, let's just say we're creating long-term sustainability through, and list your revenue streams. Watch for wordiness like utilizing or several different. Those can be really wordy, kind of like your college research papers. It helps fill it, but it doesn't really say much. So let's see how we can cut those down. All right, you guys ready? Your turn. Let's take a couple minutes, and there's an example there under that for you to revise. And feel free to, again, pop your responses in the chat and see how you can tighten this up, make it more clear, concise, and compelling. Now I'll leave my examples up here so you can see those if you want to see them side by side.
And Teresa, you had a question on if you should ever bold or underline words.
If you are able to, if it's an online form fill, usually we don't have the formatting option to be able to do that. But if it's in a document where you have the option, I'd say you can do that very sparingly and very minimally for maximum impact. I wouldn't bold or emphasize huge paragraphs or big chunks of text to where then it's going to take away from what do you really want to emphasize. But you could do that very sparingly. And I'll show you an example in just a minute. Again, this is laying the groundwork for the next question. So you guys are spot on today. But that can be used effectively in very small doses. Think of it like the sprinkles on a cake. The sprinkles aren't the whole cake, but in very small dose on the top, it can really just add the topping that you need. Great question. You guys have some good examples coming in. I see these are much, much tighter. I think you're getting the hang of this. See how sometimes just really whittling out the extra and getting down to what parts of it will make a punch. And yes, someone suggested putting in a percentage. And if we had those statistics, that's always helpful to put in more specifics like that. I'm seeing a lot of variations, and a lot of these are great. Keep them coming. All right. Want to move on to the third one? Okay. Yeah. All right. Again, remember, write tight, write positive, and write action. Use action words. Write, watch out for things like could, would, passive tense like that. All right, number 3. Again, this is one of my favorites. They all are, like I said, wrestle the data into shape. And I'll explain what I mean. This is from a grant that I wrote. Now, one thing that you can do is use your research creatively. The thing about grant applications, they're not going to tell you necessarily where to look or where to find the data. Or they may say, you can find your information on the US Census Bureau website. Thanks, that only gives me like millions of options of how to narrow it down. So you have to think strategically, what data can I find? What do I need? And how can I present it effectively? And you may have to get creative about how you present it or what you show. So in this case, I was working on a grant for a senior center, and I wanted to show that this exercise program would help make an impact and why they needed this exercise equipment for senior adults. So I dug in and found some research that said if a Missouri senior adult can live at home for even 1 year longer because of healthy meals and exercise, that's an estimated savings of over $71,000 per year in nursing home costs. So they didn't say, compare this or go look up this. I had to think through, okay, what would be a really powerful way to show that they are helping prevent this, and they are helping actually save a lot of money by providing this program that's going to help seniors stay active and healthy and independent. So how can you think creatively? What things can you use to show in a creative way? And this is a lot of fun to really dig in and find things like this that will help, that may not be obvious, but if you can connect the dots for them in a clear way, it can be really powerful. And here's an example of very specific, very sparing bold print, but to also really highlight the points I was going to make with this. Another way is using visual tools, and how can you be creative? Now this shows, you can see at a glance, we're talking about volunteer hours. And a minute ago, we had the example with volunteer hours. So I could have written all this out in a paragraph, but think about what that paragraph would be like to read as a reviewer. In 2011, our volunteer hours were 13,386. In 2012, blah, blah, blah. Before, that's going to be a long, boring paragraph. You're going to be asleep before you're done reading it, right? So how can you show that at a glance? Because if it's all written out in a bunch of words, the reviewer has to read it, they have to process it, they have to translate what is this saying, and then they have to apply it to what you're asking for and why it's important. By showing it this way, you can see immediately. It started here, it went up every single year. It ended up here. Boom, that's it. Now, this can be tricky because in an online application, we don't always have this option, but sometimes there will be a question at the end that says, do you have any additional data you'd like to share? Or is there any other information that would be relevant? That's where you can pop something like this. You can create it and include it in there. So hopefully you can find workarounds, but the more you can show, not tell, or even both, if you have to also tell, this can really be a powerful way to go about it and show at a glance. Here's another one for the lunch program growth. This was make sure your data, how can you make your data clear and impactful? And again, this is showing from 2016 to 2019, just over that span, it increased from 13,000 to 20,000. for their lunch program that they were doing. And then in the paragraph, I could explain over this 4-year span, it increased by whatever percentage that was, and really show this powerful change over time and say that we expect the trajectory to continue because this is becoming more widely known and it's a much needed resource in the community. It's the only kind of organization providing this type of lunch program and showing how critical it is to this population. So sometimes just a simple, clear glance. And this is the type of thing that, I mean, a few of you have used Instrumentl for more than 30 seconds. These types of graphs are all over the place in there on the funder data, the trends, the history over time. So that's something that can easily show you, even just give you ideas of how can you present it. How can you look at graphs? Sometimes a pie chart would be more effective. Sometimes a table where you're listing it out. But think creatively. How can you really show in a way that's going to pack that punch? And then this is something that is really fun to kind of play with, to showcase the impact. So we could say something like 33% of our district students live below the poverty level. Or we could say 1/3 of our students live below the poverty level. Or we could say 1 out of every 3 of our students lives below the poverty level. In this case, for this statistic, which one of those is going to be the most powerful? And this is going to vary, but for this one, you're probably picturing, wow, 1 out of 3. I'm looking at my classroom and every 3rd student is living in poverty. Wow. So sometimes though, that percentage or 1/3, it just varies and it depends on what you're trying to convey. Now, I want to be clear, this is not manipulating or deceiving in any way whatsoever. This is actually clarifying. You're helping clarify what the actual need is, what the statistic is, and which way can make it the most impactful to really drive it home, to tug at the heartstrings, to make them see the need of, wow, this is impacting that many kids or that many, whatever your cause is. How can you do this? So let's look at an example here. This one says, proud of our results to bringing families home again. In 2020, 185 families received access to shelter and supportive services. 175 remained housed. In 2021, 282 families received access to shelter and supportive services. 275 remained housed to date. Okay, these are powerful statistics. If you have the option, this would be wonderful to include somehow visually. And if you had more years than just these 2 years, you could show the graph over time. You could either show it in a bar graph, a line graph, whatever it would be. But think about how can you show that somehow visually. And another really cool thing to show the impact is to calculate the percent of increase year over year or month over month, whatever you're tracking and whatever you're stating. But in this case, we went with the 185 families received access. The first year it was 185, the second year it was 282. That's a 52% increase. Wow, that is huge. So think, how can you take that one step further to really just show them, spell it out? This is boom. You could do the same for the second part from 175 to 275. Calculate the percent of increase and show that, or the percent of decrease if there is something that you are making an impact on and it's actually improving the situation. Or say the crime rate is getting worse and you really need to help this community because of this kind of percentage of change. Whatever it might be, how can you do that? All right, your turn. Let's go to the next exercise. I put an example here. So I want you to describe some creative visual ways that you can showcase this information. The summer program has increased enrollment by over 60%. How can you showcase that to make a difference? And just brainstorm, describe some ways. You don't have to actually create a graph or anything, but just describe How could you present this in a visual way instead of just spewing out tons of statistics? This is on workout number 3, the first question. So take a minute, pop some of these in the chat. What are some of your ideas? Bar, pie graph, show year. Use a bar shaped like a kid. So sometimes doing graphics. Yeah, that can be fun. Showing growth and in both the enrollment and the financial aid. A line graph. Yeah, maybe including the age of participants. So there can be different ways to show this, and it may depend on the type of population. It may depend on your reviewer as well, and the type of information they're asking for. Our summer program has increased blank over 60%. Double bar graph showing both. Showing the summer program. And someone said a pie chart might not necessarily work for this one. That's something you may have to just kind of wrestle through of which ones do we use which types of visual information. Yeah, these are great. Okay, so now let's give you the chance to rewrite some statistics. A 2018 survey found that more than 75% of older Americans prefer to stay in their home as they age. How can you rewrite that? A couple of different ways. And there's another one. The survey found the percentage of those 50 plus who wanted to age in place may be even higher at 90%. So pick one of those, either one, and pop in the chat. How can you revise? How could you show those a different way to make it really impactful, and show a couple of options? Put these closer together so you can see them on the screen better. Catherine said 3 out of 4 older Americans prefer to stay in their home as they age, according to a 2018 AARP survey. I like that you flipped it around to put the impactful piece up front. 3 out of 4, and then put the site, the source at the bottom, at the end of the sentence. 75% plus, 8 out of 10, 3/4. Add the age and the information. Yeah, great idea. And then someone said that number rose to 9 out of 10 in 2021. So showing that over time too. Should you write the number 3 out of 4 as opposed to 3 out of 4? Ooh, good question. Should you write the actual number or write out the word 3 and 4? And I'm glad you asked that, because I guess technically we were probably taught in school, if it's up to, 10, you should write out the word. But in this, yeah, grammatically 3 as the word. When I am on a tight word count in grant writing, if I have a character limit and I need those characters, I will use the number 3 as opposed to writing out the word. I'm not below that. So I would say if you need to break the rules, break the rules. But always come back to clarity and impact. So is using those numbers written down as a number going to clarify and be more powerful than writing out the words? That can be a way of, instead of bold print, that can be a way of scannability. You're seeing the number 3 out of 4, and that's going to jump out at you, as opposed to just a bunch of words in the middle of a sentence. So that can be one way to do it. I have heard, though, not to start a sentence with a number to start it out with a word. But again, I'm not opposed to rule breaking in sometimes. So it's not a grammar test. No, and that's a fine line because grammar and using good writing is very important. Good punctuation, good spelling. To me, that is very important. But there are certain rules, like what we are just talking about, that I think it's okay to break. That may be personal preference, and some people may be absolute, like, no, how could you? But there may be times, always look at the impact and the clarity. What's going to give you the most impact and clarity? And if you have a bunch of grammatical errors and spelling errors and punctuation errors, that's going to be distracting. That doesn't help feed the clarity. But if you can say 3 out of 4, just the number 3 out of 4, and that packs a punch, go with that. And sometimes breaking the rules makes me twitch too, but I have done it before, and I have done it, and it can be impactful. Do you include citations when referencing surveys, articles, etc.? That's a great question. To me, partly it depends on how much space do I have, and it depends on the funder. Some funders and some grants specifically ask for sources, and I can tell they want to know, where did this come from? Others don't ask for it, and I know they're going to be lenient, but I also want it to be fairly credible. So like in this sentence where it says a 2018 AARP survey, I might include that much just to show this isn't just me making up numbers out of a hat. This is from an actual survey. Another option is I just give the information, but then in the additional materials at the end, I might also include a page that says resources or references cited, and then I'll list out everything from where I pulled all those, or maybe give the websites or specific, or maybe a screenshot even. That way I can show that, hey, this is credible. This isn't just us pulling out numbers that we wanted. So I think it's good to show, and just to help build transparency and credibility. It's not always necessary, but it can be helpful. How about hyperlinks instead? If you have the option of a reference page, you could include it, but I would also include at least some sort of reference or citation on that reference page, just in case the hyperlink breaks. Yeah, I would still include, if you have a list of your sources, I would say 2018 AARP and maybe the name of the article, if you're going to include the hyperlink. Because if you just have a list of hyperlinks, there's no guarantee those are going to stay in place and not break. How should you write if you've been advised that laymen will be judging the grant? Less foundation jargon like capacity. Any tips? Yes, I would write for the person. Always write for the person, as if you're having coffee with a friend. And how would you explain it to them, as opposed to the big jargon? Because we're so used to these terms, we're so in the weeds of it, we forget. But say your mom came and said, so what are you working on now? How would you explain it to your mom? And sometimes that helps. Just bring it down. Don't talk about all the technicalities, the curriculum and the specialty and blah, blah, blah. Just, we're helping kids learn how to use their skills when they struggle in school. We want to help them overcome their hurdles. How can you explain it to your mom? And if your mom could understand it, the funder could probably understand it. It may not need to be super simple, because you still need to include the credibility, the statistics, but also write for the person. Okay, let's pop back over and keep the questions coming. And if we still have a couple more minutes, Will, are we good?
Yeah, we've got about 10 minutes or so.
Okay, I'll just give a quick example. Here is one that someone had popped in, and I wanted to show you how I shortened it up. So this is one sentence talking about their curriculum that they offer. So I shortened it up quite a bit by just saying how they support educators with this program, period. This comprehensive self-paced online training is free of charge. See how I kind of took out the fluff and just made it more impactful, show, not tell. Instead of listing out The training is comprehensive, self-paced, and offered free of charge. It's just combining it into a much tighter format. So that's another example of how you can do this. Always think, how can this be clear, concise, and compelling? With everything you write, write for the person. And I would love to hear from you. I know we'll try to have some time for a couple more questions if anything comes in, but I would love to hear before we do that. What is one new workout we have done today that you will incorporate in your next grant project? More visuals, more concise and compelling. It takes practice. This is showing you the workout, but it takes practice. Data, statistics. Didn't even know that was a thing. Awesome, good. I'm glad I could show you. And remember, this is fun. It's fun to wrestle the data. It's fun to come up with fun facts like that. Less wordy. Yes, write tight. Write tight. Less is more. Yes, give your sentences room to breathe. Think about the person reading. They don't want to read a whole paragraph long sentence and have to process that in their brain. Make it easy for them to understand. You're laying stepping stones across the brook. Don't make them jump across the brook by themselves. Phrasing data differently to be optimally impactful. Keep right, keep it tight. Yes. And sometimes playing around with the percentages into different formats. And write for your mom. She'll love it. That can be a good test. Hand it to your mom and say, hey, mom, what do you think I'm trying to say here? And if she can understand it, you're probably good to go. Compelling, have graphs prepped. Yes, because there can be certain data you're using that you can use from one application to another, or just update it every few months as your statistics change. And yes, I love that. Ask, would I fund this? That can be really tough to ask and to look at objectively with your own writing, but that's a great question to ask. Very good. More concise statements, use graphics. Yes, and so thinking through again, I want to give you some challenges on the recap. Find your fun facts, write tight, and wrestle the data into shape. If you want to see some examples, I have a podcast episode and then also some examples on this webpage, teresahuff.com/write-tight. And I have a table that's side by side, some examples that show you how I wrestled those around to make it more clear, concise, and compelling. And then I talk through that as well in that podcast episode. So I want to ask you and leave you with some challenges. Number one, step back and really try to evaluate your grant proposals. Maybe just take it a paragraph at a time. Don't try to read the whole thing and think, okay, how can I make this better? Just pull out one paragraph and think it through with these three things: write tight, the fun facts, and how can you wrestle the data? Just look at one paragraph and apply those. And number two, where can you improve? And number three, please remember, improvement is a journey. It's not like you have to get to this perfect level. You're improving every single day, just like a workout. So enjoy the process of it. And it can be lots of fun. I love connecting with grant writers out there, and I love hearing about the work you are doing in your nonprofits. So please subscribe to the podcast or reach out and let me know what you're working on. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And like I said, be sure to check out Instrumentl if you haven't, because it's a tremendous tool to support grant writers and has so many great resources there. And I think Will has some things to share with you too. And I will monitor the chat to see if any more questions are coming in as well.
Thanks so much, Teresa. And just to give a reminder for folks, if this is your first time here, we have a variety of freebies, including Teresa's resource on running a grant readiness audit, as well as our 10 best lessons from 10 grant writing experts. So you can snag those by submitting your feedback form using the link in the comment box below. That's also super valuable for us, since these are more experimental events and we want to see whether or not you guys are interested in seeing more of these sorts of events. We had another one a couple weeks ago on writing letters of inquiry. And so we also had a grant writing chat networking session at the beginning of June. So these were more experimental events that we ran in this month of June. And in the case where you are looking to join us for a future event, I've also included a link to our upcoming events calendar in the case where you want to come back. But otherwise, there's other questions that might be coming in, and also put in Teresa's info in the chat. Again, slides are going to be shared after this as well, in case this is your first time here. We always share slides and replays afterwards. Cool. So let's see. Adrian asked for a link to the podcast, so I'll put that in the Zoom chat. And Teresa, did you have something to say as well?
Oh, I just saw a couple of my coaching students from my grant writing program are here today. So I wanted to give them a shout out. It's good to have those and have them involved and participating. It's always fun to have friends in the crowd as well, and to meet new friends along the way. So I know it's a lot of like rapid fire concepts here, but I promise you, once you start getting used to these and practice these over and over and over, it will become more natural. And I should warn you, you'll also start to notice this in all your writing, not just grants. You'll notice it in your emails. You'll see it in other things you write for articles and such, and it'll just make you a better writer all around when you implement these. I've noticed that about myself, and it's been really helpful to start using these. So I appreciate you guys coming and for being so willing to submit your applications. It was fun to just see the different types of projects you guys are working on in the community, and a lot of great writing there.
Awesome. And with that, if you guys want to check out Teresa's podcast, again, that's teresahuff.com/podcast. If you did not already create your Instrumentl account, the benefit of doing so is if you are working for a nonprofit or for a nonprofit client, you can create an account to get personalized grant recommendations of both active and inactive opportunities that you can pursue for your organizations. And you'll also be able to track all of that in one place. And so feel free to check that out. But other than that, that looks like it's it for all of our key questions for the day. Thanks so much for hopping back on, Teresa, and for everybody else in the audience today.
All right. Thank you, guys. It was great to see all of you and to see the comments coming through. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. And Miriam had a question. Do we ever offer anything on TechSoup? We do not. So if you're waiting out for something there, you won't find anything there. Teresa's code, though, is a great code to use. So definitely check out the GWS50 in the case where you're looking for a deal on Instrumentl. Thanks for the question.
Yep. Definitely go play around in the system. It's a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.